There may be a rebellion yet.
This is Star Wars The Force Unleashed, again, Krome Studios edition. The Force Unleashed is a beloved game by many, myself included. Fans still clamor for Starkiller, Coda, Juno, and Proxy to be included in the new canon, and both of the LucasArts versions of the famous Star Wars spin-off have been made backwards compatible on Xbox One. However, despite all this praise, virtually no one talks about the Krome Studios version of one of the most iconic Star Wars games of all time. There was limited press coverage before launch, and the final product was generally referred to as adequate, yet the reality couldn't be farther from this presumption. Also, spoilers ahead for a decade-old game.
Listen, pal. I'm not who you think I am, not since this.
I don't need your eyes, just your mind and everything that you know about fighting the Empire.
Krome Studios' Force Unleashed is not average. It's also not some bargain bin Xeroxed copy of a better game like so many Wii ports before it. The Force Unleashed, whether on PS2, PSP, or Wii, is one of the most impossible achievements of optimization and game design. Where LucasArts impresses with experimental gameplay, impressive, for its time, visuals, and satisfying game feel, Krome counters with polished brawling, significantly better boss fights, substantial additional content, a deeper story, and ancillary features out of the box that LucasArts either failed to deliver or never made half as engrossing. Much as everyone loves LucasArts' grim adventure in a galaxy far, far away, there's a contender here that's been substantially underestimated. Krome's take on LucasArts' vision is a rare sight these days. While DS gamers can speak to experiencing end space translating dozens of console experiences to their platform, it's unusual now to see two different developers create completely different versions of a game depending on the platform. Not simply porting one game to another system, a la High Moon's work on the Call of Duty last-gen ports, but building an entirely new experience from the ground up, often with diverging features and design philosophy, both due to each studio's talents as well as hardware limitations. The Wii, let alone the PSP, simply could not support the sort of tech underlying the Force Unleashed engine on PS3 and 360. Even the game's target systems struggled to output solid frame rates without a patch, so Krome opted instead to offer the next best thing. There's a laundry list of unique design decisions made to approximate the empowering sensation of the LucasArts vision. Use force push while a number of physics objects are near enemies, and the objects pound directly into your opponents as if you had planned it, making a single push feel impactful without loads of visual effects. Camera angles are close on Starkiller, facing upwards, making each environment and boss fight feel massive. Unleashing the Sith Scorcher's lightning barrage angles the focus like your Emperor Palpatine, taking down Mace Windu. Gripping is faster in this version, and uses the same Smart Snap feature with push, allowing you to flick towards targets effectively despite limited control inputs. The Wii version leans less on this, using motion controls effectively for all your force powers, but the generous auto-aim is a godsend on PSP. Lightning sprites are clearly 2D if viewed closely, but crackle and spread like wildfire to capture precisely the right feel. Objects break in preordained fashion, yet are animated to break in just the right way that it feels natural. Enemies ragdoll in death, and in life, are keyframed to appear as responsive as a Euphoria-empowered foe in the game's HD counterpart. Virtually every object not nailed down has some sort of projectile use or destructibility that works in your favor. There are more personal flourishes as well. All your base powers are unlocked at the start of the game. rather than taking more than half of the campaign to earn key moves. As a result, they're given a very hasty introduction, but the experience hits the ground running and only deepens the experience the further you go thanks to this decision. You don't need to navigate a complicated upgrade system either, with health and horse upgrades found as collectibles, while your primary abilities all take from a generously granted pool of experience points. Saber customization takes a bigger hit, with less interesting modifiers to choose from, but offers valuable choices until the end. The final crystal, which just gives a raw, dramatic boost to your lightsaber damage, feels like a cheat code added to the game, but thankfully doesn't appear until near the conclusion. Levels tend to flow very differently from what you might be expecting, with whole new sequences ranging from 3 trips to the Jedi Temple, to a bar fight on Nar Shaddaa, and a pirate takeover on Bespin. Something you'll notice across the entire campaign is that regardless of the location, levels are more expansive and lengthy, and perspective tricks aside, there's much more to do in them thanks to Krome fleshing out the various worlds you visit. Plus, several annoying moments, such as the Death Star firing chamber sequence in the acid pits of Raxus Prime, are thankfully cut, streamlining the focus to the actual fun and relegating platforming to collectible hunts rather than the critical path. There's also far fewer death pits this time around, which is obviously a blessing. The only disappointing absence is the Empirical, which has been trimmed down to being nothing but a cutscene. One section of its level does get reused on the PSP for some of its side content, but that's it. The best divergence from LucasArts, though, is easily the boss fights. To say that Krome fixed the boss fights would be underselling it. Krome's interpretation of the iconic boss battles, let alone several exclusive duels found in the game's multiple additional levels, are superior in every regard. The arenas are often more expansive and layered, with physics objects and unique environmental hazards, all the while changing as you go through each stage of the fight, in ways that are actually engaging, no less. No just random, the floor is lava bits. There's actual coherence to this design here. Sections of the arena might become closed off, or new elements may be introduced that can both hinder and help the player. Bosses themselves don't rely on being weak to a single attack, but instead feel like genuine opponents with unique strategies, strengths, and weaknesses. Since there isn't a blatant favoritism to one strategy, this also means that previously broken fights like Kazdan Paratus and Vader are now some of the best duels in the game. Kazdan's stage is probably one of the best ones. When it gets to the second part, there's all sorts of things you can do. You can tear apart these towers that he summons after fighting him as this giant mecha golem, and he'll use the various towers against you. He'll leap down from them. If you take them out while he's on them, he can actually take damage. You can fight one-on-one. You can throw the various objects at him. There's so much you can do in this fight. And in Vader's case, he even visibly takes damage over time as you're just tossing him around the Emperor's throne room, rather than him taking armor damage in a quick-time event, which is immensely more satisfying. To be clear, certain abilities are more ideal for each fight, such as using Force Repulse to stun the Basilisk mech, but Krome retains its emphasis on player discovery by letting you piece together how to win. This is bolstered by the additional fights found on Nar Shaddaa, Bespin, and the Jedi Temple, featuring both duels with ancient Sith spirit holocrons, as well as regular sentients with firepower to back up their lack of force powers. The duel of Proxy is cut entirely, but the cost of one unique fight for 5 more distinct encounters more than makes up for the difference. Chopa in particular is almost as much a highlight as Vader, offering fan service for fans of Knights of the Old Republic, as well as being one of the most elaborate and entertaining quicktime events in the entire game, which is saying something when Krome is positively brutal by comparison to LucasArts at points. While there's certainly great cinematography in both games, Krome features final bouts that flow beautifully as you dish out pain to the last of the Jedi and your fellow Sith Lords. A top-notch experience so substantial, it's disheartening LucasArts couldn't match it at points.
This will be over soon enough.
If the gameplay, level design, and boss battles are all king in Krome, you knew there had to be a snag somewhere, and sadly, the narrative execution is what trips the game up. From what I can tell, due to being based on an earlier draft of the story, most of the voice acting feels like a first take. While some characters like Juno and protagonist Starkiller get more time to flesh out their personalities, the deliveries aren't half as genuine and drain the scenes of any real drama. While hardcore fans might love finding out how the original story played out, much of the content cut was clearly filler from a story perspective or leaves more question than answers. Why do the Jedi have autonomous Sith Lord spirit holocrons for the Jedi trials? Why do we get time with Garm Bel Iblis and Bail Organa, but Mon Mothma, the actual leader of the rebellion, never says a word? How does Coda survive being sent into the vacuum of space rather than being dropped in atmosphere on Nar Shaddaa? Why would Coda come back to Nar Shaddaa after surviving his near-death experience, especially after saying Bail smuggled him to Bespin? And possibly one of the most ill-fitting decisions by Krome is to make every cutscene in-engine. While this means certain sections might flow more visually, it also means sometimes lengthy loading times just to render a scene where the player does nothing but watch, only to be met with another loading screen. It also relies on the in-game animations, which, while fine in combat, pale in comparison to LucasArts when it comes to enhancing the cast delivery. Starkiller is muted and stoic rather than cocky and sarcastic most of the time. Juno is as stiff as a Barbie doll. Coda looks like he has some ketchup on his face that's supposed to be scars. It undercuts so much of what Krome was going for, at least for the Wii and PS2, which have no reason of being as poorly animated as a PSP game. For PSP, I can understand. You can see in the visuals they had to cut a lot of polygons to make it work. The core plot beats are all the same, so even though we get a glimpse at a somewhat different story, it's less a director's cut and more a glimpse at the beta version of the storyline. While not bad enough to detract from the experience, the contrast is shocking when you go between the different versions. This is particularly disappointing given that the game's overall appearance is visually rich, with a wide array of colors and highly aerogenic enemies. It seems Krome had to pick and choose where the most effort went, and while it pays off, it makes you want to use a cheat code skin just so that the game auto-skips every cutscene. Unfortunately, it still has to do the loading screen for every cutscene.
You're insane! It's massive!
You're a Jedi, boy! Size means nothing to you!
Krome's vision of The Force Unleashed carries one last twist to its tail. Due to being built for both handheld and home consoles, each port has distinct features. The PS2 version is honestly the least interesting of them all, boasting more ragdoll physics and destructive detail, but that's just it along with the main campaign, while the Wii and PSP versions feature far more desirable exclusive features. On the Wii, you have fairly decent force power motion controls, a decent lightsaber wielding input that's a little imprecise, but it was before Wii Motion Plus, so I'll let that go, and a dual mode that could stand to be a touch more fleshed out. It's got a decent number of stages and a ton of characters to choose from, including some more iconic Legends characters like Mara Jade, but there's not a lot to differentiate them all besides some minor stat differences. On PSP, there's a multi-wave long Order 66 Horde mode, a dueling tower mode with over a dozen unique encounters with iconic Star Wars characters, a set of historical missions that remakes classic movie moments with the Force Unleashed amped up powers, and an online 4-player multiplayer. Outside of the multiplayer, which is sadly unavailable on both the Vita and emulation, I was able to try out each mode, and honestly, this is a lot of content to pack in alongside the meatier, lengthier campaign offered in the Krome Studios version. The sheer variety of things to do and the number of skins to unlock makes diving in at least once for each mission and mode worthwhile, and it's all incredibly replayable. There's even unique animations and scripted sequences, let alone voice lines for these various modes. The fact that this went unnoticed by press is shocking, as the PSP version is hands down the most feature-complete version of The Force Unleashed. It might not have the Infinity's DLC missions of its HD brethren, but it more than makes up for it with what it has on offer. Assets are scaled in detail across the various versions, ensuring that all content in the Wii version is equal on the PSP in terms of gameplay and level design. Only a handful of games, namely Manhunt 2 and Silent Hill Shattered Memories, would ever achieve this, and Krome's work here is top of the line. To be fair, The Wii version is easily the most graphically impressive, particularly in its Death Star level, which features massive play spaces and some of the most detailed real-time shadows available on the system. There are also a handful of additional effects and details that are absent on the PSP. Overall though, Krome's take on The Force Unleashed is jaw-dropping. The fact Krome was able to provide such a substantive experience on aging hardware is a staggering achievement. I've talked a lot about aspects of the Force Unleashed franchise that are flawed, but interesting. Not today. Krome Studios' The Force Unleashed is the shining star above the rest, even if its storytelling kind of falls flat, which is why its Wii version gets a 7.5 out of 10, and its PSP version gets a 9 out of 10.
Initiating adrenal surge now.
You had such promise. You could have been my successor, my equal, but no. But I may still have some small use for you. I still have enemies to find and destroy.